Sophia Thompson woke up that morning with an uneasy feeling in her chest that she couldn't quite explain. It was as if the air was heavier and every breath required extra effort. Something felt off, though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. As a respected judge known for her firmness, Sophia was used to starting her days with the usual focus and determination, but this day seemed to carry more weight. It was as if destiny itself was lurking, waiting to throw something unexpected her way. She rose slowly from bed, her body feeling slightly stiff after a restless night. As she turned, her eyes caught the picture she kept beside her bed, the face of her daughter, Emily, smiling back with that innocent, pure smile that always brought warmth to her heart. The girl looked radiant in the photo, a reminder of simpler times when Sophia's biggest concern was what to make for dinner. Life had become more complicated since then, and the burden of balancing her career with motherhood was something that consumed her day after day. In the kitchen, the familiar aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, but it didn't bring the same comfort it usually did. Sophia, almost mechanically, prepared breakfast while her mind wandered to the trial that awaited her in court. This case was different from the others. She knew it could determine not only the course of the career she had built with such effort, but also how society would view her. The pressure weighed heavily on her. There was so much at stake, and she knew she needed to be at her absolute best, both physically and mentally, to handle the complexities ahead. Meanwhile, little Emily bounced into the kitchen with the carefree attitude of a child who has yet to bear the weight of adult responsibilities. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and before even sitting down, she exclaimed breathlessly, "Mom, I learned to ride my bike without training wheels yesterday." The joy in her voice was enough to pull Sophia out of her thoughts. She smiled, a genuine, loving smile, and bent down to hug her daughter. "That's amazing, sweetie. I want to hear all about it." Despite the worries that dominated her mind, Sophia knew that these moments with Emily were precious. Moments she couldn't get back if she let them slip away. As Emily excitedly recounted her adventure on the bike, describing every pedal as if it were the most incredible thing in the world, Sophia tried to pay attention. But her mind, always quick, flitted between her daughter's words and the ticking of the clock. Time seemed to be slipping away from her, as though the minutes were evaporating. Every time she glanced at the clock on the wall, the weight of the responsibility waiting for her in the courtroom pressed down harder. Emily, however, didn't notice the anxiety creeping over her mother, happy to share this special moment. Before we continue Sophia's story, I want to take a moment to invite you to subscribe to our channel. We bring content that not only entertains but also inspires, and we don't want you to miss out on the upcoming stories that are sure to move you. Take this opportunity to subscribe and stay connected with our videos, as we have so much more to share with you. Returning to Emily's excited tale, Sophia couldn't help but reflect on what her daughter had said about balance. How ironic that the little girl, in all her innocence, spoke of balance with such lightness, while her mother constantly struggled to keep the scales balanced between work and personal life. How many times had Sophia found herself thinking about the moments she had missed with her daughter because of her career? The thought of all the things she could have done differently always came with a sharp pang of guilt. Guilt that mingled with the anxiety for the day that was just beginning. Sophia glanced at the clock once more and realized that time was passing much faster than normal. She tried to stay calm and hide the rush, but her body was already reacting to the urgency almost automatically, moving faster and more precisely. Emily continued to chat enthusiastically about her bike triumph, and Sophia made a great effort not to let it show that her mind was already in the courtroom, reviewing the details of the case that awaited her. With one last sip of coffee, Sophia rose from the table, trying but failing to completely disguise her haste. "Sweetheart, Mommy has to go to work now," she said, attempting to keep her tone calm, though her mind was racing. Emily, still full of energy, looked up at her with shining eyes. "But we can continue this wonderful conversation when I get back, okay? And maybe later we can go for a bike ride together," Sophia suggested, hoping the promise would make up for the rush of her departure. Emily's eyes sparkled even more. That would be amazing," she exclaimed, full of joy and anticipation. Sophia smiled, feeling her heart warm momentarily, but the weight of her responsibilities quickly returned. As she hurried upstairs to change, her body seemed to race against time. Opening her closet, she was hit by the realization that something had gone terribly wrong. Her usual courtroom attire, always neatly arranged, was nowhere to be seen. She had completely forgotten to pick it up from the dry cleaner. Her heart raced, and panic began to creep in. Trying not to let the panic overwhelm her, she grabbed the first things she could find: a pair of jeans and a simple shirt. It wasn't what she usually wore to court, but she had no choice. As she dressed, her mind drifted to the trial that awaited her. It was a sensitive case involving excessive force by law enforcement, something that always attracted media attention and sparked intense debate. Sophia knew that her decision would be scrutinized, criticized, and discussed from all sides, and this weighed on her even more. It wasn't just about justice, it was about her reputation as well. As she rushed down the stairs, Sophia was caught off guard by Emily, who ran over to hug her. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Her daughter's small body pressed against hers made Sophia want to forget everything and stay there, safe in the unconditional love of her child. But duty called. She bent down and kissed Emily's forehead lovingly, promising herself she would make up for this moment later. Before we continue with Sophia's story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt torn between your professional and personal responsibilities? Leave a comment sharing your experience. Sharing our stories can help us find solutions together for this increasingly common challenge in our lives. Grabbing her car keys and throwing her bag over her shoulder, Sophia left the house in a whirlwind of emotions. The street was already busy, traffic starting to build up, which only heightened her anxiety. She got into the car, but her mind was torn between the case awaiting her and the guilt of leaving home in such a hurry without being able to give more attention to Emily. On the way to the courthouse, Sophia tried to organize her thoughts. The case she was about to preside over was more than just a legal dispute. It involved ethical and moral issues, matters that affect how society views authority. The responsibility of delivering a fair judgment weighed heavily on her shoulders. The pressure was immense, and Sophia knew that all eyes would be on her that day. But, as always, she was determined to deliver justice. No matter how complex the case, she would approach it with the same integrity as always. When she arrived at the courthouse, Sophia noticed something unusual. The unusually large crowd of reporters and cameras at the main entrance suggested that the case had drawn more attention than expected. This wasn't uncommon, but that morning, the commotion seemed more intense. Deciding to avoid the chaos, Sophia opted to enter through the side door, something she occasionally did when she wanted to avoid the spotlight. Little did she know that this simple decision would change the course of her day. As she approached the side entrance, she was stopped by a young security officer. He was new, with a face Sophia didn't recognize. His gaze traveled up and down, assessing her with a serious, almost suspicious expression. "Identification, please," he said firmly, as if it were his first time making such a request. Sophia, used to being recognized by courthouse staff, was surprised by the request. She had never needed to show identification to enter the building where she spent most of her days. "I'm Judge Sophia Thompson," she replied calmly, pulling the badge that hung around her neck. However, something about her appearance, perhaps the casual clothes she wore that day, seemed to have sparked suspicion in the young officer. He glanced at the badge with a skeptical look before returning his gaze to Sophia, distrustful. "You seem suspicious," he said, the words hanging in the air like an unexpected blow. "I'll need to verify your identity more thoroughly." We're approaching a crucial moment in the story, but before we continue, I'd like to ask you for something. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to leave a like. This is very important for YouTube to keep recommending our videos so we can continue bringing inspiring stories like Sophia's. It's free and it helps us a lot. Thank you. Now let's continue with the story. The officer's words hit her like a slap. Suspicious? She, a respected judge, was being treated like an intruder in her own workplace. For a moment, Sophia was speechless. The injustice of the situation made her relive all the stories of prejudice she had heard over the years in her courtroom. Never, however, had she imagined being on the other side of that experience. The word, suspicious, echoed in her mind like an incessant siren. Regaining her composure, she tried to explain calmly. "Look, officer, I'm late to preside over an important trial. It's a delicate case that requires my immediate presence." But the young officer, resolute, shook his head. "It doesn't matter who you claim to be. I need more detailed verification. Please come with me." Sophia felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could this be happening? She, the highest authority in that courthouse, was being treated like an ordinary person, or worse, like a suspect. Taking a deep breath, she tried to remain calm. She knew that many people faced similar situations every day, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. As the seconds ticked by slowly, Sophia could feel the curious stares of those around her. Some whispered, others pointed discreetly in her direction. The flush of embarrassment and indignation crept up her neck. Her hands began to tremble slightly, and she clenched them into fists, trying to contain the rising emotion. The feeling of helplessness was something Sophia wasn't used to, and it bothered her deeply. "Officer," Sophia began, her voice controlled but with a slight tremor of frustration, "I understand that you're doing your job, but there's been a mistake here. I am Judge Sophia Thompson, and I need to enter immediately. There's an important trial waiting for me." The young officer hesitated for a moment, his eyes revealing a mix of doubt and stubbornness. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the rules are clear. Without proper identification, I can't let you in." Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the urge to scream in frustration. When she opened them again, she saw a group of lawyers she recognized passing through the main entrance. They saw her and waved, but they seemed confused to see her standing there with the security officer. The situation was becoming increasingly embarrassing. Sophia could feel her authority being undermined with every second she stood there, barred from entering her own workplace. She thought of Emily, of how she always taught her daughter the importance of staying calm in difficult situations. Now, it was she who needed to follow that advice. "Look," Sophia said, trying a different approach, "I know you're just doing your duty, and I respect that. But I have a duty to fulfill as well. There are people inside waiting for me, waiting for justice. Every minute we spend here is a minute of delay for them." The officer seemed to consider her words, but the expression on his face showed he still wasn't convinced. Sophia felt a wave of despair. How could she prove who she was without her usual identification? Finally, after what felt like hours, she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. Someone was approaching quickly. As the tension built, a second security officer appeared. He was older, with a calmer demeanor but still maintained a firm posture. As soon as he saw Sophia, his eyes widened in recognition. "This is Judge Thompson," he said, addressing the young officer in a tone that made it clear a mistake had been made. The young officer looked confused for a moment, but before he could respond, the more experienced officer turned to Sophia. "I apologize, ma'am. It seems there's been a misunderstanding." Sophia nodded, grateful for the intervention, but the word "suspicious" still echoed in her mind, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Finally entering the courthouse, Sophia tried to regain her composure. The courtroom was packed with lawyers, reporters, and spectators, all eagerly awaiting the start of the trial. She ascended the bench, adjusting her posture, trying to leave the incident at the entrance behind her. But something inside her had shifted. The word "suspicious" continued to echo in her thoughts, provoking reflections on prejudice and judgment based on appearance. When she finally sat down, she felt the weight of all the eyes on her. The murmur in the room gradually died down until a tense silence filled the air. Taking a deep breath, Sophia tried to calm her racing heart, organizing the papers in front of her with slightly trembling hands. She knew she would need to be completely focused on what was to come. "All rise," the court officer announced, his voice echoing through the room. The sound of chairs moving filled the space, and Sophia stood along with everyone else, feeling her legs a little unsteady, perhaps still affected by the situation she had just experienced. She looked around, observing the room full of people, all waiting for her words and her leadership in this important trial. "You may be seated," she said, her voice firm, though something in her posture revealed an internal tension. As she settled back down, Sophia recalled the young officer who had stopped her at the entrance and the look he gave her before being corrected by his more experienced colleague. That brief moment of eye contact still haunted her. In his eyes, she saw a mixture of regret and something else. Perhaps shame? Or fear? It was hard to say for sure, but that encounter, brief as it was, left marks that now affected her judgment in an unexpected way. She turned her attention back to the case at hand. The case of the day, highlighted in bold letters in the documents before her, seemed to mock her experience. The irony was not lost on her, a case of police abuse of power and excessive force. It was as if the universe was trying to teach her a lesson at that moment. Sophia cleared her throat, trying to push the situation at the entrance from her mind. Now, she needed to focus on the trial, to set aside her emotions and make a decision based on facts and the law. We are here today for the trial of the state versus Officer James Anderson, accused of excessive force during a police stop, she began, her voice echoing through the room. As the prosecutor stood to make his opening statement, Sophia felt a wave of conflicting emotions. She had always prided herself on being an impartial judge, someone who judged each case fairly and balanced. But now, with the memory of her own experience so fresh, she wondered if she would be able to maintain that neutrality. The prosecutor's words were strong, denouncing the abuse of power, the violence, and the need to hold accountable those who are supposed to protect the public. Each sentence seemed to strike Sophia like an arrow, reminding her of her own vulnerability. She struggled to maintain a neutral expression, to not let the internal storm show on her face. She needed to focus on the facts of the case, not her emotions. When the defense attorney rose to present his arguments, Sophia paid even closer attention. He spoke about the pressures security officers face, about the decisions they must make in split seconds. Part of Sophia wanted to reject those justifications, dismiss them as mere excuses. But another part, the more rational part, knew she needed to listen to both sides with the same care, even though her emotions were deeply involved. As the hearing continued, Sophia felt increasingly torn. Each argument, each testimony, seemed to echo, intensely, her own experience that morning. She wondered how she could be truly impartial when, just earlier, she had been a victim of prejudice and judgment based on appearance. The doubt grew inside her, undermining her usual confidence. The system she helped uphold now seemed flawed in a more personal way. The trial proceeded, and Sophia maintained her professional demeanor. She listened carefully to the arguments from both sides and asked pertinent questions. But deep down, something had changed. She now saw the case from a new perspective. She understood better the fear, the frustration, and the injustice that victims of abuse of power felt. Suddenly, the door to the courtroom opened with a soft creak, interrupting the flow of the trial. Sophia instinctively looked up, her heart speeding up for a brief moment. To her surprise, it was the young security officer who had stopped her earlier. He entered the room looking nervous, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Sophia could sense his anxiety, even from a distance. His eyes quickly found hers, and in that instant, Sophia saw the regret reflected in his gaze. The prosecutor called the young officer to testify, and Sophia watched closely as he took the witness stand. His posture, once so firm and authoritative, now seemed hesitant. He avoided eye contact with Sophia as he answered the questions, his voice trembling slightly with each response. The prosecutor's questions were incisive, increasingly difficult to answer clearly, and Sophia noticed the sweat forming on the young officer's forehead. He was uncomfortable, and it was visible to everyone in the room. It was as if God had orchestrated that moment to teach both of them a lesson. As the testimony continued, Sophia couldn't help but reflect on the events of the day. How a simple exchange of words at the courthouse entrance had triggered a series of thoughts that now affected her view of justice. What she experienced in that brief moment of prejudice was something that many people face daily, but for her, the experience was new and unsettling. Watching the young officer, Sophia wondered how many times he had judged someone without even knowing their story. The trial came to an end, and despite everything, Sophia delivered her judgment with her usual firmness. However, there was something different in her words. She spoke about the importance of fair justice, about the dangers of prejudice and abuse of power. Without directly mentioning her personal experience, it was clear to everyone that something deeper was behind her words. The audience listened attentively, absorbing each sentence with seriousness. After the trial was over, Sophia retreated to her private chambers. She needed a moment to process everything that had happened that day. Sitting in her chair, she looked at the picture of Emily on her desk, and suddenly, everything seemed clearer. Her daughter's innocent smile brought a new perspective on the importance of fighting for a more just and equal world. How could she create a better future for Emily if the very system she worked in still perpetuated injustices? As she reflected, a soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said, expecting it to be her assistant bringing new documents to review. To her surprise, it was the young security officer, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice almost a whisper. "Judge Thompson, I'm sorry for what happened earlier. I acted rashly and judged you by your appearance. That's not what we should do, especially in a place like this." The words came out with difficulty, but they were clearly sincere. Sophia observed the young man for a moment, seeing the regret etched in his eyes. She could feel the weight of the guilt he carried, and for a moment, she considered reprimanding him. But something inside her held her back. "Understanding the mistake is the first step," she replied in a firm but compassionate voice. "True learning comes when you change the way you see and treat people. It's not just about me or you. It's about making sure our justice system is truly fair for everyone." The young officer nodded, absorbing her words. "I joined this profession wanting to make a difference, to protect people. But today I realized that I was the one others needed protection from. I promise I'll be better, I'll do better," he said with renewed determination. Sophia stood up, extending her hand to the officer and said, "That's the path to true justice. It's not just about punishing mistakes but creating opportunities for growth and change. I hope you take this lesson with you and share it with your colleagues." The young officer shook her hand with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am, for giving me this chance to learn and grow. I won't waste it." As he left the room, Sophia felt a wave of hope. The day had been challenging, but also revealing. Sometimes, true change begins in small moments of reflection and learning. She gathered her things, ready to return home, where Emily was eagerly awaiting the promised bike ride. On the way home, Sophia reflected on the lessons of the day. The prejudice she had faced, the complexity of the case she had judged, and the sincere regret of the young officer. Each experience contributed to the larger view she had of justice and equality. It was an ongoing process, a journey where everyone needed to learn and grow. Arriving home, Sophia was greeted by Emily's warm hug, who exclaimed with joy, "Mom, you're back. Let's go ride our bikes now." Her daughter's enthusiasm was contagious, and Sophia felt the weight of the day begin to lift. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll just go change." As they rode through the park, Sophia watched Emily, who seemed so pure and full of life. And it was there, riding alongside her daughter, that Sophia realized the true meaning of justice. A world where people aren't judged by their appearances, where every human being is treated with dignity and respect. This was the fight she would continue to fight, not just as a judge, but as a mother and a citizen. At the end of the ride, Emily stopped her bike and pointed to a man sitting on a bench, his head bowed. "Mom, he looks sad." Sophia recognized the young security officer. For a moment, she hesitated, but then she remembered the conversation they had. She smiled at Emily and said, "Let's go talk to him." Sophia walked alongside Emily to the bench where the young security officer was sitting. He looked up as he noticed them approaching, surprise washing over his face. "Judge Thompson," he said, standing up quickly. I didn't expect to see you here." Sophia smiled gently. "Neither did I expect to see you. Is everything okay?" The officer looked down, visibly uncomfortable. His eyes flickered between Sophia and Emily, as if he didn't know what to say. "I was just thinking about everything that happened today. I still feel bad for how I acted towards you. It was wrong and I'm sorry." Emily, who had been watching the interaction closely, frowned in curiosity. She tugged on her mother's hand, asking with the innocence of a child, "Mom, is he sad because he did something wrong?" Sophia smiled at her daughter, kneeling beside her. "Yes, sweetheart. He made a mistake today, but the most important thing is that he recognized it and is trying to do better." We all make mistakes, and what matters is that we learn from them and become better people." The officer, touched by the simplicity and sincerity of Emily's words, looked at her with a sad smile. "Your mom is right. I judged someone by their appearance and that was wrong. But I'm learning from what happened. I promise I'll be a better person." Emily gave a wide, innocent smile. "Everybody makes mistakes, right? The important thing is to learn and do better next time." Sophia felt her eyes well up with tears as she saw the wisdom her daughter, even at such a young age, already seemed to carry. "Exactly, my love. That's what really matters." The officer seemed emotional, his eyes glistening as he absorbed the words of little Emily. "Judge Thompson," he began, his voice trembling, "I want to thank you for giving me the chance to learn from my mistake. I promise I won't disappoint you." Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled with compassion. "I'm glad to hear that. And remember, it's not just about you. This lesson should be shared with your colleagues so that we can all work towards a more human and fair justice system." The officer nodded firmly. "I will do that, ma'am. Thank you for this second chance." Sophia and Emily said their goodbyes and returned to their bikes. As they rode back home, Sophia reflected on everything that had happened that day. The lessons she learned, the decisions she made, and the impact those decisions could have, not just on the justice system, but also on how her daughter would see the world in the future. When they got home, Emily ran to show Sophia a drawing she had made earlier. "Mom, look what I did," she said, holding up the paper proudly. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands, a woman, a girl, and a man in a uniform. Sophia looked at the drawing with eyes full of tenderness. "It's beautiful, my love," said Sophia, kneeling down to be at Emily's level. "Who are these people?" Emily smiled, pointing to each figure. "That's you, Mom. That's me. And that's the man from the park. We're all holding hands because now we're friends, and nobody judges anyone by their appearance anymore." Emily's words hit Sophia like a revelation. In the simplicity of a child's drawing was a truth so deep and powerful that adults often forget. Respect, understanding, and empathy are the foundations of a just society. Sophia hugged her daughter tightly, feeling more determined than ever to continue her fight for a more just and equal world. That night, after putting Emily to bed, Sophia sat in her office. The day had been emotionally exhausting, but also filled with valuable lessons. She picked up a sheet of paper and, without hesitation, began writing a letter to herself. Not a judicial decision or an official report, but a personal reminder of what truly mattered. "Dear future Sophia," the letter began, "today, I learned more about justice than in all the years of my career. It wasn't through a trial, a law book, or a lecture. It was through a moment of vulnerability where I was judged by my appearance and at the same time saw the impact that has on people. Always remember that true justice goes beyond the laws we apply. It lies in how we treat people, in our capacity to forgive and give second chances. It's in the way we look beyond appearances and believe in the potential for growth in every individual." Sophia continued writing, pouring her feelings and reflections onto the paper. She knew there would be difficult days ahead, days when the weight of the world's injustice would seem overwhelming. But now, she had a beacon, a reminder of why she had chosen this career and how she could make a difference, not just as a judge, but as a human being. The next day, when she arrived at the courthouse, Sophia noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The staff greeted her with a renewed respect, not just for her title but for who she was as a person. The young security officer, now showing a more confident and serious demeanor, smiled timidly at her. "Good morning, Judge Thompson," he said, and Sophia noticed the determination in his eyes. As she walked to her chambers, Sophia felt that something had changed, not just around her, but within her. The experience of the previous day, though uncomfortable, had strengthened her. She had gained a new perspective on her role in the justice system and how her actions could influence the behavior of others. At her desk, a pile of cases awaited her, each representing a new opportunity to make a difference. Sophia looked at the files with a fresh outlook. They were not just numbers or legal processes. They were stories of real people, each deserving to be heard and judged with compassion and fairness. She took a deep breath, picked up the first file, and began her day's work, determined to apply the lessons she had learned. The days that followed brought significant changes to the courthouse under Sophia's leadership. She initiated new awareness programs for the staff, promoting training on implicit biases and the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. The culture within the courthouse began to shift, little by little, as the staff learned to recognize and confront their own prejudices. Sophia also expanded her work outside the courthouse. She began giving lectures at local schools and universities, speaking about justice, equality, and the danger of judging others by their appearance. At one of these lectures, Emily, who now understood more about her mother's work, sat in the audience, listening attentively. The pride in her eyes was evident. One day, after a lecture at a school, the young security officer who had approached her months before came forward. He was different, more mature and confident. "Judge Thompson," he said with a smile, "I wanted to thank you again. Your words changed my life. I decided to go to law school. I want to be like you, someone who fights for a better justice system." Sophia smiled, her heart full of pride. "I'm so happy to hear that. Remember, being a good justice professional goes beyond applying the law. It's about seeing the human being behind each case. It's about justice, yes, but also about compassion." As Sophia watched the young officer walk away, she knew she was on the right path. The impact she sought wasn't just in the sentences she handed down, but in the lives she touched, the minds she helped open, and the changes she inspired. Back home that night, Sophia told Emily about the encounter with the young officer and how he was now following the path of justice. "See, Mom," Emily said with a smile, "now we're all friends, working together for a better world." Sophia hugged her daughter tightly, knowing that the lessons of that day would stay with her for a long time. As she prepared for bed, she reflected on her journey. The justice she sought wasn't just in law books or court decisions, but in the way we treat each other, in the dignity we show to every person, regardless of their appearance or position in society. And so, Sophia fell asleep with a smile on her face, ready to face the challenges of tomorrow with renewed determination. The next day would be another opportunity to make a difference, to spread understanding and compassion. And she was ready to take on this new chapter with all the strength and wisdom she had gained. Because now, more than ever, she knew that true justice begins in the heart of each one of us. We've reached the end of this inspiring story, but the journey towards a more just world continues. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll stay updated on all our stories and reflections about justice, equality, and the power of compassion. Thank you for watching until the end, and we'll see you in the next video.